Okay. Okay, so
Hi, bro.
oh, Shoshana is here too. Okay. Good.
Hi, Shoshana.
Now
Hi.
okay, so we're all here. So today is Sivan 25th. So the Hayom Yom for today is a care in a man's heart, Yesh Chena. Our sages offered two interpretations of that last word. Remove the care from the mind or discuss it with others. And the Tzemach Tzedek commented, with others who are other, only in the bodily sense, but are completely united with him, for they empathize with him. So it's just a quick little vort from the Hayom Yom, just that the idea of having a mashpia. I know I was living in Crown Heights when the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that everybody, every man, woman, and child should have someone who they're in a personal relationship with to discuss things that are on their heart, not just a rabbi, because it is an idea. It says, "Aseh lecha rav," make for yourself a rav, ukaneh lecha chaver, and purchase. Interesting use of word. Purchase for yourself a friend, which means you should invest in that relationship. So that's from Pirkei Avos. Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a rabbi. Kaneh lecha chaver, purchase for yourself a friend. But the Rebbe, I guess, thought that a combination in some way of someone who is learned and who has the right hashkafa or hashkofa, worldview or way of seeing things, that everybody should have somebody older and wiser. A man should have a man, a woman should have a woman, children should have older people who are, you know, if they teenage, if you're a teenager, then like a slightly older teenager, but everybody should have such a person that they could look up to and discuss. And then the Tzemach Tzedek says, when it says discuss it with others who are others only in the bodily sense, but are completely united with him in terms of the empathy. So others, somebody who's on the same page as you, but who has a broader perspective and a broader vision. So that's the Hayom Yom. There's the cover. And it really feeds very beautifully into the Parsha for today, and many ideas concerning the Parsha, which have to do with perspective and having the right vision and seeing things in the right way. So the Parsha is Shlach, which is, and he sent, and it's talking about the story of Moshe Rabbeinu sending spies to check out the land of Israel. Now, when I was preparing the class, I was looking for maybe putting a different background, because here I am in the Bamidbar, and I was thinking, should I put a background, a big eye, because it's all about vision. So we're not in the month of Tammuz yet. We're the 25th of Sivan, so we have another 5 or 6 days to go. But the month of Tammuz, which we're coming into, the tribe we've talked about before, every month has a work to do in the work. It has a work to do in the month and is connected with one of the tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. So the month of Tammuz, which we're coming into, the tribe is Reuven, which really means Reuben. Look, see, I had another son. Look, see, I have a son, Reuben. And the month of Tammuz, the actual work of Tammuz is the work of fixing one's way of seeing things. So just as a little preamble to the seeing, you know, there's a custom now, and I really love this custom. From the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, it's a custom amongst all of Israel to learn Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers. And each week you do a different chapter, And then Chabad has, and I think other people have also, to continue relearning all the chapters of the ethics of the fathers, one chapter at each Shabbos, on each Shabbos, till Rosh Hashanah. So then the cycle repeats again and again. So this past Shabbos was the second chapter since Shavuos. And in reading it, and I was doing it with my grandson, and so it was really fun to talk about it and ask the different questions, so and discuss the different topics that came up. But it talks about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 outstanding disciples: Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, Rabbi Yossi the Cohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Nathaniel, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And the one Mishnah talks about the different qualities of all these different rabbis, very nice things it says about them. And then it says, and he asked all of his students, go and see which is the good way to which a man should cleave. So, Amar lehem tsu'u uru'u, go and look, ezuhu derech tova, which is a good path, sheyidbak, that should cleave ba ha'adam. What's a good path that a person should cleave to? And Rabbi Eliezer Omer, and Rabbi Eliezer said, ayin tova, a good eye. So that was Rabbi Eliezer's answer. And just to not keep you in suspense, one of the rabbis said a good friend. That was Rabbi Yehoshua, said a good friend. Rabbi Yossi said a good neighbor. Rabbi Shimon said one who considers the end result of his actions. Rabbi Elazar said a good heart. And then Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said he liked the answer of a good heart because that included all of the previous answers. And then the next one is, which is a path the person should stay very far away from, and then each one answered in the opposite. And then Rabbi Eliezer's answer would be a bad eye. Now, Tammuz is all about vision and all about the perfecting of vision. It's really all about how to come to having a good eye. And we'll see that having a good eye is really important, and we'll see it as we go through the Parsha. But I just want to read you something from Melinda Ribner. She said, this is the month of healing, of seeing, for improving the clarity of our vision. What we see reflects our thinking. We see our own projections and often do not see things as they really are. We may be uncomfortable or comfortable with what we see. Ask yourself often this month, obviously next month when we come into Tammuz, am I seeing things as they are, or am I simply projecting my own needs and desires onto this person or onto the situation? So when we look at things that occur in the Torah while they're in the Midbar, while they're in the desert, and I have this nice visuals of us being in the desert right now. I'm in the desert. There's a lot of situations that show us that the situations kind of went awry, got into trouble because there was a problem with the way people were seeing things. So first of all, looking back, last week we spoke about the Menorah, and we spoke about Aaron having the mitzvah of lighting the menorah, and we also spoke about the fact that that's compared to sharing Torah, sharing wisdom with other people, lighting them up. And the mitzvah in the Torah was that Aaron should light up the menorah so that it's sort of self-sustaining, that it's lit and he doesn't have to be there holding the torch up to light the lights. And in Chabad, they always teach from that, try and share Torah and inspire other people with your teaching of Torah such that they become lit up so that they can then illuminate and light up others. So that's a very nice teaching about the menorah. But we also shared the Rebbe Nachman teaching that we, in order to be an illuminated and an illuminating menorah, you have to make sure that the oil that you're feeding yourself with is the mitzvah, the halacha says, shemen zayit zach, pure oil, good oil, high quality oil. And we said, make sure what you see is going to help you and assist with keeping you as a menorah pure, what you hear, what you take in through your mouth and in through your nose, positive images so that you reflect out in a positive way. And we said that that's so important that one should have the right perspective. So when we look at situations in this in not only this parsha, but in the whole Sefer Bamidbar, there's lots of things that show us that people's vision was off. So before I come into this week's parsha, which is the big issue with faulty vision, we know that we're going to be reading about the rebellion of Korach, and Korach challenged the leadership of Moshe because his vision was off. He was deceived by his own perception of how things should be. We know that we're going to come to the story of Bilam, and there was a story that's an aspect of Bilam having incorrect perception. And then when Pinchas is a zealot and he acts in defense of Hashem, he sees what needs to be done and he does the right thing. But again, it's on seeing. And in Parshas Chukas, which is not next week, but the week after, when somebody needed to be made pure after becoming impure, and they use the ashes from the red heifer, the priest has to use his eyes and look to the entrance of the Mishkan. And then a little bit later down the road, the Yidden all have some kind of plague, and in order to heal themselves, Moshe makes a golden serpent. And it's not enough that the Yidden, he just holds that golden serpent. The Yidden actually would have to look with their eyes up to that serpent. By the way, that's become a symbol for all medical things, that they would have to look up at that golden serpent. And then Hashem also says to Moshe, go up and see the land which I've given to Bnei Israel. But we know that there's been some really bad seeing in our history, and bad seeing when they were in the desert. And one of the bad seeings was the sin of the golden calf. And the sin of the golden calf, or calf, as they say it in America, it happened a few parshiot behind us. And that also happens actually in the same time, happened on the 17th of Tammuz, which I've explained to you each month. The month starts with the new moon, when the themes of the month are kind of modest or subtle. And then as the month comes to the 15th, 16th, 17th of the month, that's the energies of the month are the most expressed. And then it kind of peters down and goes down. So on the 17th of Tammuz, we had the sin of the golden calf. And that was for sure a result of defective vision, because after they received the Torah, Moshe went up to Har Sinai and came, and the people thought he was going to come back in a certain amount of time, and he didn't, and they got nervous. And then it says actually the Satan deceived the people with the desert mirage of Moshe being carried up to heaven dead. And he was delayed in coming down. And from that situation, they weren't punished so terribly much from that situation of the golden calf, but it says from the moment they made this calf, the decree, and which decree? The decree that the Yidden would be punished and have to stay in the desert for 40 years, that decree was aroused in his thought, and he was sort of waiting for the right time to execute that thought. And just before we come into what really triggers Hashem into deciding that the time is right now to punish them, even for what happened before, when their punishment was sort of held, the punishment of the golden calf was held, the big punishment. Just to mention also that the main sin that we start off all of Torah learning with, the sin of Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, was also a sin of vision, because it says that the woman Chava, she saw with her eyes that the tree was good for food and it was desirable to the eyes, and so she ate and she gave to her husband to eat. And it all started with her kind of looking and seeing and being led by her eyes. So I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to look into the story of what happens in this week's parsha with the Meraglim, the spies that are sent out to check out the land of Israel. That's where the name of the parsha comes from. If you look at the beginning, it says, V'yadaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, and Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Shlach lecha, send for yourself anashim, send for yourself men who will scout the land of Canaan, which I'm given to the Bnei Israel. You shall send one man from each of his father's tribes. Each one shall be a chief. So they sent, Moshe chose very good people, 12 of the best, 12 of the best of each tribe. And they all went, and from Reuven, we have this guy, from Shimon, this guy, Yehuda, Issachar. So from the tribe of Yehuda, we have Kalev, the son of Yefuneh, so Kalev. And we have from Yisachar, Yigal, Ephraim. From the tribe of Ephraim, we have Hoshea, the son of Nun. So we have Kalev and Hoshea. And those two of the spies are going to be very important. And then it goes through all the other names of the tribes. These are the names of the men Moshe sent to scout out the land. And then it says, Moshe called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Yehoshua, or instead of Yosh, so let's just read it. Eile shemot ha'anashim asher shalach Moshe latur et haaretz v'yikra Moshe laHoshea ben Nun Yehoshua. So he adds on a yud to his name. Now this is going to be very important, because what happens when the tribes go into Israel is that a lot of the, not the tribes, the spies, when they go into Israel, a lot of the spies get a little bit confused and misled by what their eyes see. But Yehoshua, he gets that extra yud in his name, which gives him the 10 additional powers that are added to his soul. We've spoken about the tree of life and the 10 powers of the soul. So he gets these extra qualities of vision. And so he has a different way of approaching this story. And Kalev, when he comes into Eretz Yisrael, he does an interesting thing. They're all touring around the land, and they tour for 40 days. So the whole month of Tammuz, which is a month of seeing and a month of working on seeing, that whole month they're touring through the land. But Kalev goes to Hebron, and he goes to daven at Hebron, and we know who's buried in Hebron. Abraham and Sarah are buried in Hebron. Yitzchak and Rivka are buried in Hebron. Yaakov and Leah are buried in Hebron. Adam and Chava are buried in Hebron. So by davening there, Kalev also gets a koach, a strength to keep his head screwed on in the right way, so to speak. So what happens, he sends them to scout the land, and he tells them, go up this way in the south and climb up on the mountain, and you'll see what kind of land it is. And the people see if they're strong or weak, are they few or many, what of the land, is it good or bad? What of the cities in which they reside? Are they in camps or fortresses? Are they fortified cities or just kind of cities where people are, living but not in a fortified way? What is the soil like? Is it fat or lean? Are there any trees in it? Now, this is an interesting thing about the tree. Some people say that, are there tzaddikim there? Are there righteous people there? Are there people who cleave to the tree of life? Is there the tree of life there? So it's an interesting thing to look at. What did Moshe really mean about the trees? Are there any trees in it? But the way he asks, so that's the way he asks, because he asks later about a tree, they're wondering, is he talking about the tree of life? So then we come here, this is the second chapter. They went and explored the land from the desert of Zin till Rehov, and then they went up and they came to Hebron, and there they are in Hebron. Let me just see if Rashi says about Hebron. They came to Hebron. Here we go. Kalev went there alone. He came just by himself to daven at the graves of the Avot in prayer, that he shouldn't be enticed by the counsel of his colleagues. So thus it says, I will give him Kalev, the land on which he has walked. So that's so that's the Rashi over there. And then they come to the valley of Eshkol, and they cut a branch with a big cluster of grapes, and that's the beautiful image of these people carrying these grapes on their shoulders. The bunch of grapes was so big that two people needed to carry these grapes on their shoulders. That's the image I put on the WhatsApp chat. They took pomegranates and figs. They came to a place called Valley of Eshkol because they named it after the grapes. And they came back from scouting the land at the end of 40 days. Now, what happens? They came to Moshe. They came to Moshe and Aaron. They came to Moshe and Aaron and all the Bnei Israel, and they brought back a report as well to the entire congregation of Israel, and they showed them the fruit of the land. And then they said, we came to the land which you sent us, and it is flowing with milk and honey. It is flowing. I'm going to take the Rashi off because I don't know if we need the Rashi. Let me just come. They came to Moshe and Aaron, and they brought back, and they said, it is flowing with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who inhabit the land are mighty, and the cities are extremely huge and fortified. And there we saw even the offspring of the giant. What is that all about? And then the Amaleks, it says the Amaleks are here and the Canaanites are there. And then look what happens here with Pasuk 30. Kalev silenced the people, and he said, we can for sure go up and take possession of the land. We can for sure overcome whatever big, powerful nations are there in the land. For sure, we can do it. But the men who went up with him, the other spies, said, Kalev silenced the people, and he said, we could surely go. But the men who went up with him said, we are unable to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And I feel like this is the line where the whole parsha pivots and flips, because We don't know what's going to happen until this moment. We don't know that, you know, you could be a person in America thinking about Aliyah. You could be a person trying to deal with all those forms that are so difficult with the nefesh b'nefesh. You could be that person, but you can say it's not impossible. It's frustrating, it's difficult, but I can do it. This is where the whole story flips. It says, but the men who went up with him said, it's too hard. We are unable to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. Now, this is where the whole disaster really happens. They spread, Pasuk 32, they spread an evil report about the land which they had scouted, telling the children of Israel, the land we passed through to explore is a land that consumes its inhabitants, and all the people we saw in it are men of great stature. Now, when it says they spread an evil report about the land, what happened is, and Rashi, I believe, tells us that the people were listening and were wanting to listen to Kalev, but then these other spies went in and kind of kept their propaganda machine, convincing them that it was really too hard. And then not only that, but this is where the really, really bad part is. There we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, descended from the giants, and in our eyes, we seemed like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. I'm just going to go to the Rashi so you can see the Rashi, because this is so heartbreaking. This, what does it mean that we saw in our eyes, we were like grasshoppers? So it says here, here, and so we were in their eyes, here on the Rashi of 33, we heard them telling each other, there are ants in the vineyard who look like people. And they completely bought into that narrative that compared to these people that were living in Eretz Yisrael, we were like ants in their eyes, and so we became grasshoppers in our own eyes. Look at Pasuk 33, it says, in our eyes, we seemed like grasshoppers. And so we were in their eyes. And then what happened? The whole community raised their voices and shouted, and the people wept on that night. And that's really very intense. So I'm just going to pause it for a minute. Let me come back into here. What? Pause 1 second. Oh my gosh, I have to figure out how I can pause the, where can I pause here? Oh man, I'm still here, right? Okay, let me see. It's all goes well until I'm trying to stop share. Okay, I'm just going to pause the record and come here. Okay, trying to work with my, okay. Still have some technical difficulties here working out how to do this. Let me just, okay. So they make this huge error of vision because they're seeing themselves in this very diminished light, seeing themselves as insects, seeing themselves as ants, seeing themselves in very diminished form. And as a result of that, Hashem gets really, really angry with them. And the consequence of that is that they end up that they have to, you know, wander around the desert and be in the desert for 40 years. And a little bit later, it says Rashi brings, there's a Rashi that says that what were they doing when they were following their heart? The heart and eyes are spies for the body and act as agents to bring a person to sin. The eye sees, the heart desires, and the body commits a sin. So this idea of how do we see, how do we look, how do we form our opinions about something? The Torah is, and all these stories in the whole Sefer Bamidbar, dealing with this vision. How do we see with correct vision? And then it's interesting because a little bit further on in the Parsha, we have the mitzvah of tzitzis. And the mitzvah of tzitzis is so that when a person might be thinking to do an avera, then they should not do it. So let me this is part of the end of the Torah. I actually could bring it up in this shared screen. So if I go to the last part here, sorry, it is Maftir. It is 15. Yeah, it is 15 and 37. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Speak to the Bnei Israel, and you shall say to them that they shall make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and they shall affix a thread of sky blue wool on the fringe of each corner. This shall be fringes for you, and when you see it, you will remember all the commandments of the Lord to perform them, and you shall not wander after your hearts and after your eyes, after which you are going astray. And then this Rashi about how your eyes, the heart and the eyes are spies for the body and act as agents to bring a person to sin. That is a really beautiful Rashi. So let's just talk about this idea of tzitzis for a little bit, because it's really very beautiful. First of all, it says they shall affix a thread of sky blue wool on the fringes of each corner. So while how do you make tzitzis? How do you get this blue fringe? So there's a special little fish or animal from the sea called a chalazon, and it has this dye in it, and it releases this special blue dye, and then you can dye one strand or some of the string, a thread. It should be one thread, and it should be this blue color, because when you see the blue color, you'll remember the sky, and you'll remember Hashem. And that's going to remind you not to wander after your eyes and after your hearts. So this is a pretty interesting idea. Whoopsie, I'm losing myself again. This is a pretty interesting wow. How long have I been muted? I hope I haven't been muted for too long. Well, you saw that teaching about tzitzis, and you saw the teaching, if I was muted, the idea that tzitzis is going to keep your eyes connected to the mitzvot, and because of the mitzvot, because of seeing the tzitzis, you're going to be reminded of the mitzvot. Seeing the tzitzis, you're going to be reminded from the blue color that you have to get from the special sea animal called a chalazon. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure. That you get this beautiful blue dye that is the color of the sky, and you're going to then, you're going to be reminded to look up at the sky, which is a reflection of the ocean, and it's going to keep you from sin, basically. And then it says also that the first mitzvah you give a small child, a boy who's just become 3, is you give him tzitzis. Why? Because it's an antidote. It's an antidote to all these deceptions of the eyes. Now, we are women, we don't wear tzitzis, but the idea is that the mitzvot are the antidote to all this deceptive seeing. And what was the worst sin of the sins of the meraglim, of the spies, is that they didn't think of themselves as big enough. They saw themselves as insects. They saw themselves in a diminished way. And they didn't have faith that God had promised them that he's going to bring them into the land of milk and honey, had promised their forefathers. But it's not just that they didn't have faith in Hashem that was really the very disturbing part. What another part of it was that they didn't have faith in themselves. They didn't have faith in their own capacity to be big enough to live in the desert. Now, we know that the Lubavitcher Rebbe has explained many times that, he didn't explain it many times, but we've talked about his explanation many times, that while everyone was in the desert, it was a little bit like a corona bubble. Why do I say that? They didn't work. They didn't have to go and earn a living. They basically were in a protective bubble. They did get all their needs met, not like some people are suffering and struggling and have illness and sickness during corona. I don't mean it in that way. And all of those people should have a refuah shalema. But I mean in the way that everybody's had to kind of get quiet and stay home. And a lot of people haven't been working, and people haven't been rushing around, and people haven't been shopping so much, and people have taken time off of work and gone quiet and gone inward, and a lot of that. And while they were in the desert, they ate man for their food. Hashem took care of them. They had the anei hakavod, the clouds of glory protecting them all around. Their clothes were dry cleaned. Everything was very miraculous. They didn't want to go out of the bubble. They didn't want to go in to Eretz Yisrael and engage with what would have been real life. It wasn't just fighting the people, the nations and the tribes that were there. It was entering into real life where they would have to plant and reap and harvest and deal with physicality. Now, so on the one hand, they thought of themselves as too small, not big enough, not having, and on the other hand, they didn't have trust in Hashem. We were in our own eyes as grasshoppers. The thing is that they were looking at things from a very limited visual, and limited in 2 ways. Limited in one way because they were looking at the land in very physical eyes, not appreciating that God would help them. It's a supernatural country. Things happen through God's blessing, and God would protect them and help them to beat their enemies, and everything is higher than nature in a way, and they needed eyes of trust and faith in God. The same God who had done all these miracles for them while they were coming out of Egypt, the same God that can create the world and could do everything. He told them he will protect them. He told them he would let them come in. That's the one thing. But the other thing, which is what I've always learned from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and this is the teaching of Chassidut, is that the whole reason why Hashem created the world is not for them to be in the Midbar, in the desert, where they were close to Hashem, getting manna, being protected by the clouds. The whole purpose of creation and the whole reason of the whole story was to go to Israel and do what we've talked about so many times in class, make a dira b'tachtonim, take the lower physical world and elevate it, inhabit the land, inhabit the physicality, plant, reap, sow, deal with real things, the sweat of your brow, earn your living, deal with physicality. That's the purpose of the whole journey. And there was, even though these spies were very high, one thing is they didn't think of themselves as big. Another thing is that they didn't trust God would take them and protect them. The third thing is they kind of enjoyed the spirituality of being in the Midbar. It's like a person who never wants to leave yeshiva and just go out and, live in the world and keep the Yiddishkeit and keep the mitzvahs, but actually engage with the world, which is what is, according to Chassidut and to Tanya, we need to engage with the world to transform the world and make the whole world into a place where we have this close relationship with Hashem. So when we put on tzitzis, when men put on a talis, when we also say Shema, we close our eyes and we close off the physical vision and kind of try and see with eyes that see the bigger picture, so to speak. And I just want to end quoting from a shiur that I heard today from my lovely young woman who lives in Monsey, Annie Lippitz, who's a really gifted teacher. And she was saying that part of this dira b'tachtonim, this creating and moving into Israel and living in a physical way, it really has ramifications for us in terms of being ready to, this whole story of go into Israel and let's have Mashiach already. Let's get there. Let's be in a messianic headspace. That what happened with the Meraglim, the spies, is that they were limited by their preconceptions. They were limited by we are just people who were slaves so recently. We were in Mitzrayim. We were so limited. How can we possibly go in and defeat those tribes and fight the war? But in another way, metaphorically speaking, we in the Midbar and we hesitant to go into Eretz Israel. Or on another level, this is the level she was addressing, we in Galus, we in exile. How do we go into a headspace of Geula, of redemption? And the way that we do it, on the one hand, we have to be brave enough to tackle all the things that are required to deal with nefesh b'nefesh, deal with the giants, enter into the land, be trusting and have faith that we big enough and that the land is big enough, that Hashem will protect us and guide us. But this idea that even if you're in Israel already, you could still be in Galus, because if you don't put your head into a Geula consciousness, then you could still be stuck. What does this mean? So the word for exile is Galut, and the word for redemption is Geula. Another way to say Galut is to call it Gola, and Geula is Geula. So Gola and Geula, there's just one letter difference. That letter difference is the Aleph. How do you go from Gola to Geula? So we always said, and we've spoken about it in my class many times, you put the Aleph in, you put Hashem in. But really, maybe you are in Geula already. Maybe, the Rebbe always taught us, Mashiach is here, just open up your eyes. Open up your eyes to see that which you think is a giant, that obstacle that you think is so much more powerful than you, that you think is so much, too much for you to overcome, actually is not such a big giant, that the things we have to overcome to bring ourselves into Eretz Israel, or I don't know if you can see me, when I go over here, my fingers disappear, Eretz Israel or a Geula headspace, it really might just be opening our construct, our vision, our understanding, not to be boxed into the preconceived notions of how we've always been, not to be like the Meraglim, too afraid to step into the new stage, not to be, even though we're out of Mitzrayim and we're not slaves anymore, we still have a slave consciousness. We still think everything's difficult. We still think we can't beat the giants. We still think of ourselves as grasshoppers, and we still have in our mind the way we think other people are thinking about us. It's such a heartbreaking verse that Rashi brings, that they heard them speaking to us and they said they saw us as ants in the vineyard, little teeny tiny ants. That's how they were feeling that the other people were thinking about them. Well, first of all, what do you care about what they're thinking about you? But they took that in, they internalized that. So I'll turn off the recording, but before I do, I just want to bless all of us to have a Geula consciousness, to be able to go into Eretz Israel, whether in actuality or metaphorically, but to move out of a headspace of Gola into Geula, to see, as the Rebbe says, Mashiach is here, Mashiach has come. It's our eyes, it's our vision that has to change. We have to look with an ayin tov. Is it an ayin tov or an ayin tova? Let me just see. I want to say the grammar right. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we have to look with a good eye to see the good in things, to see the opportunity that is awaiting us, to see that we have what we need to defeat and be victorious over our challenges and our struggles, that the klipot, the things that are holding us back from good are not that strong. They could really easily fall, and to have the trust and the faith in ourselves and in our own capacity to be victorious. So that's the Vort. And I'll thank you if you're going to watch online. I hope you enjoyed. And send me any comments or questions. I'd love to hear from you. And